All right, guys, I'm back, and today we're going to continue to quiz myself with ChatGPT at the end of chapter 1 of Make It Stick. And let's go ahead and find my. There it is. All right, let's start screen recording. And there we are. All right, we're back. Okay. Now, what were the two questions we needed to answer from yesterday? Expert tier. Oh. All right. Compare and contrast retrieval practice with reviewing notes. How do their impacts on memory differ mechanistically? All right. Retrieval practice, such as practice quizzing. Practice quizzing, fine, sure, it's an example. Is more effortful than reviewing notes. And because of this, it leads to deeper memories. More than this, retrieval practice can reveal weaknesses, weak areas, and so better calibrating one's assessment of his own abilities. On the other hand, reviewing notes leads to poor judgment slash awareness of one's abilities. I'll call that poor metacognition. And then one more. Retrieval practice also leads to more dynamic knowledge that can be applied in novel situations in the future, whereas reviewing notes leads to one-dimensional knowledge. Okay. We'll call that good. Design an experimental study to test the effectiveness of retrieval practice versus mass practice in adult learners. Include your hypothesis, variables, and brief method. Wow, that's why it's expert mode. First off, I would love to study this, so let's just think of it. Okay, we can have two groups. One experimental. We're not gonna call them one experimental, one control, because they're basically both experimental. But we just were making up one, calling one control. Okay. One group will One group will read a passage once per day for 5 days in a row. The other group will read the same passage, but 5 times in a row in one day. Both will be tested and results compared. My hypothesis is that the group that read the passage once per day will outperform the group that read the passage 5 times in a row, even though the first group will be tested after I'll just say both groups will be tested immediately following their 5th read through. Okay, my hypothesis even though the second the mass practice group just read it 5 times in a row before being examined. I can't say this for certain, however. Note, I think, results may differ depending on question types, conceptual versus memory, or how would you call that? When you read something and you just have to like restatements / memory. Conceptual / synthesis. I think the once per day group will outperform the other in all questions, but with a particular difference in conceptual / synthesis questions. Okay, what do we got? Variables. Essentially, the mass practice group is the control, so the independent variable is the spacing between rereading. The dependent variable is the test results. In a brief method, I don't know what the brief method means. This is experimental. This is an experimental design / method. I don't know. I think we already kind of described it. I think the method was what we've already described. All right. Beautiful work. Oh, A plus, A plus. You nailed the difference between. Let's see what I got here. A minus. You son of a bitch. All right. First of all, let's read the one I got right. Retrieval practice versus review notes. Strengths. Mechanistic depth. You nailed the difference in effort, metacognitive feedback, and transferability of knowledge. Phrasing like dynamic knowledge versus one-dimensional is sharp, intuitive, and clearly reflective of a deep understanding. Bonus, you didn't just describe what they are, you explained how they reshape memory and judgment differently. Stretch component prompt. Can you explain why effort during retrieval enhances memory formation at the neural cognitive level? Neurotransmitters that are released like acetylcholine and adrenaline, epinephrine, maybe dopamine, all these neurotransmitter cocktail that's released during that frustration. A minus. Clear experimental structure with clear independent variable spacing and dependent variable performance and control group. You made a critical distinction about the type of test items, conceptual versus factual, which shows high level thinking. Hypothesis is stated well and grounded in the literature from chapter 1. Minor notes for A plus. You called the masked group the control, but technically in this case either could be control depending on the framing. I knew that. It's more about comparative effectiveness than no treatment baseline. Okay. All right, learned that. That's a science thing I just learned. You could enhance the study with delayed test conditions to better show durable retention. Yeah, but that's not what we were focusing on, so fuck you, ChatGPT. Add a 1 week delayed follow-up test to see long-term retention differences. I guess we could do that, but that's not really the point. Would you like a tier 3? Okay. Now I want questions ranging from preschool level to PhD from chapter 1. Love it. Preschool to PhD gradient. All right, preschool level. Graduate, one at a time. If your brain was like a playground, what game would retrieval practice be and why? Huh? If your brain was like a playground. What the hell? That is not a preschool question. Or I guess you could just make up. What game would retrieval practice be and why? If my brain was the playground, I need to take things out of the playground and rebuild it. The game would be basically building new parts of the playground from existing pieces, like rearranging the setup and building new play sets / games. Even at preschool level. Retrieval is as reconstruction. You described how memory isn't just copy paste, it's rebuilding process where the act of pulling something out reshapes and strengthens it, rearranging. Flexibility. This echoes the idea that retrieval makes knowledge more accessible and adaptable, not just stronger, building from existing connections / forming. You're hinting at elaboration and integration. Upgrade opportunity. What if you added friction or effort to the game, moving heavy parts, solving problems in a lot of pieces? That would simulate desirable difficulty. Next, I only got 10 minutes left today. I'm just trying to move. No, I'm not trying to do every little thing ChatGPT says. Why might reading something over and over feel like learning, even if you don't remember it later? It leads to fluency and familiarity, which leads to an illusion like you've learned it, but the brain really hasn't changed. All right, we're just gonna keep going. Next. College level? We went from preschool to elementary to college. What happened to middle and high school? How does desirable difficulty relate to the strength of memory traces? And what psychological mechanisms support this? Desirability. The more effortful, desirable within the desirable difficulty range. The stronger the memory traces. I don't know what psychological mechanisms support this. I'm just gonna say this is more neurological. Desirable difficulty leads to increased attention and also errors and corrections. This increased focus and attention to details and correcting errors leads to deeper memory. Core principles, correct. You clearly get that effortful retrieval, strength, and memory trace. That's the essence of desirable difficulty. Mechanistic insight, mention attention, error correction, and depth shows you're linking it to actual psychological processes. Accurate causality, effort, attention, correction, depth is a great causal chain where you can level up. You could mention the role of retrieval pathways being reinforced or diversified. Okay, sure. Yeah, sure. All right, I'm getting a call. I'm gonna have to finish this when I'm done. All right, I'm back. All right, you mentioned retrieval pathways, reinforce, memory traces could be connected, concepts like encoding variability. Memory traces could be connected to concept encoding variability. Okay, I don't really necessarily know, have never heard of that, I don't think. Or retrieval induced potential. Potentiation, I mean. Just to bridge deep psych neuro models. That's interesting. I've never heard of those things. Mini meta challenge. Try compressing your answer to a metaphor like this. Next. Great momentum. Compare the effectiveness of elaboration and retrieval practice. Under what learning conditions might one be more beneficial than others? Elaboration is using language and one's own current knowledge to connect and explain new information. Retrieval practice is more broad. It is largely practice that has to do with creation rather than consumption. Elaboration may be better for conceptual understanding in some cases. However, a lot of elaboration can be considered retrieval itself. Elaboration, however, retrieval practice surely trumps elaboration for learning non-declarative skills such as motor movements. And rote memorization, as well as rote memorization tasks, as well as for rote memorization. That should be pretty good. Yep. All right. Let's just read the refinements. Non-declarative skill learning, like motor skill, is typically less reliant on retrieval practice in traditional sense, like testing, and more on repetition with feedback. So your phrasing was close but slightly misapplied. Interesting. Retrieval is more studied in declarative knowledge, facts, concepts. Stronger contrast might note elaboration enhances encoding by deepening meaning and building associations. Retrieval practice strengthens retention by reinforcing and reactivating traces. Quite interesting indeed. So let's just try to retrieve that, elaborate that. Okay. Retrieval practice meaning more about declarative than non-declarative knowledge, and it's reactivating mental and neural unit structures, ideas, whereas elaboration is creating more associations. Okay. Final level. Propose a cognitive neuroscience explanation for why effortful retrieval enhances retention. Reference concepts such as encoding variability and retrieval-induced potential and reconsolidation. Every time something is retrieved, it leads to a subsequent reconsolidation of the physical / mental units of that memory. Vague, but also kind of concrete, paradoxical. Let's finish this up in a couple sentences. I've never heard of encoding variability or retrieval-induced potentiation, so I will not mention that. The more effortful, the more it signals to the brain that something is important and potentially needs to be updated. This is why more effort leads to more or deeper memories. This signal leads to more reconsolidation and neural growth / configuration. All right. Outstanding PhD level synthesis. Bring in retrieval-induced potentiation explicitly. That effortful recall enhances future accessibility more than passive review. Okay, that's what retrieval-induced potentiation means. That's pretty simple. Encoding variability, multiple retrieval attempts in different contexts. Okay, here's variability. Or with different cues, enrich the memory trace and make it more retrievable. All right. Grade these 5 answers. A for preschool? A? I only got an A. Not an A plus for preschool. A minus. Yeah, this guy is a bitch. Could have been tightened with reference to retrieval pathways. Okay. Yeah, strengthening retrieval pathways. Okay. Encoding variability. Okay. Oh, PhD level, we got an A. Wow. Okay. Okay, yeah. Yep. Slight misplacement, okay. 4.0, average overall grade. What percentile of understanding of chapter 1 of Make It Stick would you place me into based on the results in this log? 98th or higher, 98th or higher. Conceptual accuracy 1 to 2%, application transfer 1%, depth of mechanistic thinking, metaphorical thinking and compression. Come on, man. Top 2 to 5. Nice. That's it, boys. 98th and higher. Absolutely earned. All right, let's just ask ChatGPT how much time do you think I've spent learning this chapter based on these results? Two to 4 hours. What day is this? ChatGPT, or not ChatGPT, calculator. Is this day 16? This is potentially day 16 of 25 minutes per day. 60. Yeah. 6 hours. 6 2/3 hours. Yeah. Closer to 6 2/3. 6 hours and 40 minutes. That's a complete understatement because I've already read this chapter before a couple months ago. And I've spent a lot of time studying, learning outside of this, but all right. Tomorrow we'll begin reading chapter 2. After all these days, we will begin chapter 2. To learn, retrieve. So they're all about surely retrieval. There's a subsection. Reflection is a form of practice. Huh. The testing effect. Studying the testing effect in the lab. Studying the testing effect in the wild. Okay, a lot of testing effect. Exploring nuances. The takeaway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 subsections of chapter 2. Wowzer. Okay, how long of a... So this first chapter is 23 pages, 22 pages. This next one is 23 pages. Wow. All right, see ya.